So hear me out here. This might be the single most transformative thing that changes how you think about, training and what's important to prioritize in terms of your archery training and competing and preparation and stuff like that. So that's exactly what I want to talk about in this video, and I want to explain why sometimes it might be great to not shoot for an entire week and you could actually be in a better place than you were before. So that's what I'm going to explain now. So let's start with an analogy. Imagine you've learned how to drive, you drive a manual car or a stick shift for those in the States, but imagine you drive a manual car and you've learned basic, how to change gear, use the clutch, change gear, whatever. Imagine you drive this for 10, 15, 20 years. You don't really get any better at changing gear, do you? You don't improve the speed of your gear changes. You don't, become more like a racing driver and you can get better rev matching or whatever, because the key thing is you're not really practicing this. You're just using your car to get from A to B and you're changing gear, but you're not really focusing on it. So the key thing here is there's not any deliberate practice and there's no intensity to what you're doing in terms of, the number of gear changes you're doing in a short period of time. You're not really focusing on this and you're not nailing down on this specific skill. This is exactly the same with archery, and this is why I think sometimes it could be good for a lot of people to not shoot for a week. So let me explain that a bit more. Many archers, especially maybe if they go to the club a regular number of times a week, they'll be doing the same thing, but they won't really be getting any better. And that's absolutely fine if you are going to the club to, enjoy what you're doing and you just want to, hang out with some friends and shoot. And that's absolutely, I don't have any, problems with that at all. That's amazing, that's great. But if you want to get better, then that's maybe not the best way to do it, because what you're doing there is the equivalent of that driving analogy that I said about. You're basically just driving without the deliberation and the focus on a specific skill and having that deliberate practice. So that's the difference there. If you kind of extend this a bit further, for a lot of archers that go to, maybe you work a 9-to-5 job and you've got a certain amount of time you can train, then maybe it would be better to not shoot for a week, because you could spend that time more efficiently doing other things that can have a much bigger impact on your shooting. So yes, I understand this is not going to be as fun, because the reason, myself included, the reason why we shoot is because it's fun, it's enjoyable, and you get to shoot with friends and you go to the club and shoot with friends and stuff like that. That's why you shoot. But having this maybe period where you're going through different changes and stuff like that, having this week off from actual shooting can be great. And even just as a thought exercise, it can change how you prioritize what your training is. So let me go through that more now. So for the example I said before, imagine someone goes to the club 3 times a week and they shoot at home 3 times a week. Imagine you've got a close range boss at home and then you shoot at the club 3 times a week, maybe 3 arrow ends at the club, shooting an indoor range, and then maybe 3 to 6 arrow ends at home, shooting close range, and maybe they shoot 2 to 3 hours at the club and then maybe an hour at home or something. So doing that isn't really gonna kind of nail down what we were talking about before. Deliberate practice isn't really, unless you're super focused in those points as well. Even if you are with the deliberate practice, there isn't enough intensity there. So that's the other part of the puzzle. So even if in that small amount of time you have a deliberate skill that you're focusing on, you're really disciplined with that, then the intensity in 3 arrow ends, having that intensity is not physically demanding enough to get any better in terms of controlling your bow and stuff like that. And the reason this is important is because this is one of the most common things for intermediate archers, is not having enough control on their bow. There's not enough intensity in their training sessions, so they don't ever really get stronger, and then their bow control doesn't improve, and then it's hard to improve the technique as well. So kind of switching up how you do this, how you think of training, can be really important. So let's take that example, 3 times a week at the club for 2 or 3 hours, and then 3 times a week at home for an hour. Let's take that example and say, what could you do if you didn't shoot at all for that week? And this is why I think it would be better for a lot of people. So say you don't shoot at all for that week. You've got 3 hours for 3 times that you're now not at the club shooting 3 arrow ends. You've also got an hour where you would normally shoot at home. You've also got the travel time 3 times a week, there and back to the club, that's now freed up. So you've got that time as well. So now you've got all this time, what can you do with it? So in these, for a week, for example, if you're not shooting, you could get massive, massive benefit from doing bow training, doing visualization, doing drills with the band, doing drills with the bow and just drawing up, and just really solidifying your shot sequence, writing it down, spending time basically looking through your previous technique. Maybe you've got some videos, looking through that, seeing what areas you need to improve. Maybe doing a bit of research into how you can improve that, looking at videos of top archers shooting, looking at our website for technique stuff and stuff like that. There's loads on there. So you can look at all this, spend that time. Specifically, the bow training can have a massive impact to improve the strength because the intensity is there. In a 30-minute bow training session is a huge, huge difference in intensity to shooting 3 hours at 3 arrows per end. It's complete different ends of the scale. Likewise, doing the visualization, just sit down and visualize for a bit, it's completely different intensity on the mental side because you're really focused on what you're needing to do in your shot. You're really focused on your shot cycle. Then this comes in together with writing your shot cycle down, getting it nailed down on paper, getting everything correct, and making sure that you understand your shot cycle. So doing these things can have a massive, massive impact. Also the skills drills, the things I talked about before. For example, if you've always been working on your bow arm side, you've been working on your release, your bow arm side, but you've not done double bow roll drills, you can just practice a few. You can just practice swinging the bow like this. You can practice release follow through drills, just simply doing this. You can practice, if you've been working on your release, you can just practice getting the feeling of that. So just doing these drills can be really, really useful and massively improve where you are. So in this week, for example, you might do, instead of doing your normal training, you might do 30 minutes of visualization every day. Or let's just say even 15-20 minutes, 15-20 minutes every day. You might do bow training 3 times a week. You might do 150 drills with a band. You might do that in a mirror, getting feedback. You might do 150 of those twice a day, so that's 300 of those. You might also do 50 just normal bow draw ups, just with your normal bow drawing up, doing the technique, seeing how you can transfer that from your band. And all these things can be much more beneficial actually because you're being deliberate with what you're focusing on. You've got much higher intensity there, much more intention. You're not just shooting arrows for the sake of shooting arrows. And you can improve a massive amount. You might be surprised if you do this and then go to next week, you might be surprised where you are. You might be surprised how better your shot feels, how more in control you feel, how much more you know your shot because you've gone through and learnt each part. So I think you would be surprised by this, and I think having this week off would benefit a huge number of people, especially if you have kind of a similar training schedule to what I mentioned already, where you shoot at the club sometimes and you shoot at home sometimes a little bit each week. So I think it could be really, really beneficial. So that's a little bit of an extreme example, obviously, just not shooting for a whole week. But I'd like to challenge, if anyone's up to it, to maybe in the comments below, maybe don't shoot for a week. I'd love to see if anyone's up for the challenge, don't shoot for a week and do this. Maybe do 30 minutes of visualization a day, just drills, some bow training, stuff like that. Obviously manage your load because you've got more training time here. If you just do bow training, loads of bow training, suddenly that's not good. Make sure you're sensible with this. Manage your load, listen to your body. So if you're up for it, I'd love to see in the comments below if anyone's tried this, maybe in a week's time, obviously, but I'd love to know your thoughts. And also, it's not just about necessarily just taking the week off and doing this, maybe for everyone, but changing how you think about your priorities, just to show you how important I think visualization is and bow training is. So maybe you just take out one of your sessions a week. One of the sessions you would normally shoot blank boss at home. Maybe you'd shoot 50 arrows or something at home. Maybe just take that one session out and replace it with bow training. Maybe, before each day at the club, you do 50 draw ups with a band to add some skills in there to get that specific, drill to improve that skill and get that deliberate practice. So it's just also a thought exercise to change how you think about what the real priorities are. and how you can progress more quickly. So I hope you found that video useful. As always, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll also put the links to social media down below, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.